Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight. This is our 15th show here at Biscuits and SEC for Biscuits and SEC Live. You got Bossman and Hammer back from the Christmas and New Year's hiatus. You can see he's working off the phone tonight. We're trying to figure out his technical difficulties, but at least we got him back. He is in Colorado, just moved there. So, Hammer, how you doing? Is it cold out there? It looks like it.
Yeah, I'm doing well. It's not too bad today. It was almost 50 degrees at the high. Probably dipped back into the 30s by now, but felt good. Went on a nice walk this evening. And, yeah, I'm on my phone, so we're battling technologically, but we're here. So excited to get back in the swing of it, talk a little football, talk some semifinals, some title game, transfer portal stuff, etc. Should be a good show.
Absolutely. Well, we've got a lot in store for you tonight, and we love that go-get-'em mentality, that mentality of do or die, do anything it takes to get the show done. So we appreciate that from Hammer. So you guys, before we get into the show, make sure to sign up, as always, for the Biscuits and SEC newsletter, the Morning Biscuits newsletter, which we write on Mondays and Fridays. Myself, Bossman, I write it on Mondays. Hammer's got it on Fridays. You can sign up for that at biscuitssec.com/newsletter, which you see below. It's free to sign up. Everything going on around the SEC that's going on that week. Right now, we're starting to get into a little bit of SEC basketball. We saw the SEC first iteration of the D1 baseball rankings came out this week. So we're starting to cover some of the other sports as we get past football here. And then also be sure to follow us on social media at Biscuits and SEC across our social media platforms. And also be sure to head to our YouTube channel if you're not watching us there, and at Biscuits and SEC, and subscribe there and hit that notification bell as well so you don't miss an episode on Wednesdays. All right, everybody, we appreciate you guys being here with us tonight. We got a lot to get into, so let's get right into it. College football semis. We wanted to recap those and just talk a little bit about those. You can see up here I got the scores. So Notre Dame, in the Capital One Orange Bowl, they take down Penn State 27-24. And then the following day, we had the Goodyear Cotton Bowl in a frigid Arlington. And Ohio State took down Texas 28-14. Texas kind of stalled there at the end. It was looking like they might tie it up. And then Ohio State gets a big strip sack score that ends up burying Texas in the end. So to start us out, Hammer, what were your thoughts on the semifinal games? I guess we can start with Notre Dame, Penn State.
Right. So first thoughts, and this happened to be the case for both games, unfortunately. As I was in the process of moving out to Colorado, was driving across the country, tough to do in the middle of January when a giant winter storm hits. So I was battling the elements last week and didn't get to watch as much of these as I would like. I actually was listening to them on the radio broadcast, so a bit of a throwback, and then, of course, watch the highlights. The Penn State-Notre Dame game, I mean, I don't have a ton to say about, I know there's some narratives out there really for both of these coaches that, they can't win the big one. More so James Franklin, right, just because he's been there a lot longer. He's established at Penn State. But I don't think Franklin did anything wrong in this game. I don't think Freeman did. I think it was really just a hard-fought, hard-nosed football game. And at the end of the day, Drew Aller made the costly mistake right at the end. And, that's not on Franklin. I don't even blame Franklin for being aggressive there, right? You don't want to go to overtime. You're in the college football semifinals. Drew Aller's a good quarterback. He's been good about not turning the ball over this year overall. I mean, you trust that kid, right? He's a third-year starter, I think. That was the right move, in my opinion, to go for it, and be a little aggressive and try to get the field goal and come out there with the win. I mean, again, you're in the college football playoff semifinal. You're not playing for overtime. You don't get there playing for overtime, especially in a game that you had, right? Penn State had the lead. Notre Dame fights back, and, Franklin would have been destroyed if they would have played a conservative there. So he made the right call. It was just, with Aller, you can't throw over the middle like that under pressure. Like that, he needs to know in that situation, we're being aggressive, but if we take a sack, it's okay, right? But overtime is still there if the play is not. The play was not, and I think I saw in the post-game presser, actually, he said he tried to throw it at the guy's feet, I think was his explanation. Again, I think you just swallow that one, and you take the sack and you go to overtime. But just a heck of a game overall. I mean, Notre Dame, we're talking about the losing team first here, and I really should be leading with Notre Dame because that team with Marcus Freeman, we're Aggies. I was impressed with what they brought to Kyle Field week 1. I thought they were extremely physical, a lot more physical than I thought they would be. They out-physicaled A&M, and that's kind of just been the tale of their entire season. I mean, when it comes down to they need to make a play or they need 1 yard or they need to make a stop on defense, they just do it. And they did it the other night. Riley Leonard, he's not perfect, but if you need him to make a play, he's going to make the play. And it's just a heck of a win for Freeman and Notre Dame. And, being an SEC podcast, got to shout out Brian Kelly for leaving Notre Dame for greener pastures to win a national title. And Marcus Freeman, has been a lot more successful so far. Not that Kelly's doing a bad job at LSU, but Freeman has turned Notre Dame into something that Kelly could not. And we'll see if they can get it done in the title game. But just for them to get here is extremely impressive for that team.
Yeah, without a doubt. I was super impressed with Notre Dame. Like you said, I think it's a mentality thing. They look like they have a different mentality under Marcus Freeman than they did under Brian Kelly for all those years. There's just something about this team and the way that Marcus Freeman coaches them that they believe they can do anything. And people talk about Notre Dame's talent level as if they don't have the talent of other teams. Notre Dame has an incredibly talented team. Like I find that narrative to be ridiculous. Are they, in the top 5, right? In like the blue chip ratio? I don't think they are, but they're top 8, I think. They're
right
way up there. So I've always found that narrative to be ridiculous. But at the same time, they do have to play up in these games, and they didn't always do that during the Brian Kelly era. They got to the national title one time, right? And then they get blown out. In the Freeman era, thus far, like they have a couple bad losses, right? Like they lost to Marshall last year. They lost to NIU.
Yeah.
Like there's some bad losses on that resume. But when push comes to shove, when the big games, when the lights are on, this team shows up. I have not seen a game, right, where there's a big game that they haven't shown up in. And they did it again against Penn State. And they don't flinch. That Penn State went up 10-0. And you're thinking, oh man, like Penn State, they might run through Notre Dame and this one might get ugly quickly. And it didn't. Notre Dame took the punches early, and then they just methodically fought back, and just stayed in it.
Totally. And on that point, again, when you just talk about the team aspect of Notre Dame and the culture that Marcus Freeman has instilled, they're down 10-0. Not much time left in the second quarter. Riley Leonard's out with a potential concussion. The backup quarterback comes in, Angeli, and they don't skip a beat, right? They're like, hey, we trust this guy. We're going to be aggressive. We need points before halftime. They go down, they get a field goal. I mean, that was pivotal to go get that field goal before half and then come out in the second half and march right down the field with Leonard when he's back in there. And basically, just like it was like Penn State is trying to close the door, right? They played a much better first half, and it's like there's barely a crack left, and Notre Dame pushes back a little bit to get that field goal, and then the first drive of the third quarter, Notre Dame blows the door in, and it's like, hey, we're here to fight. You thought you were going to shut the door and walk out of here with no scratches. No, we're hitting the mat right now. I just locked the door behind us, and one of us is coming out of here because we're here to play. And it's just, I think sometimes like halftime adjustments, it varies, I think, a lot from game to game, coach to coach, whatever it is. But there's something about Notre Dame and Freeman. I don't know if it's specific schematic adjustments they make or if it's just him riling them up. But, man, they come out in these second halves and just play great football. And they did it again, right? Like Denbrock's a good OC. Al Golden is a great DC. They're just pressing all the right buttons at the right time. And that's how you end up in a national title, especially like you're saying, when, they are not talent deficient, but they're also not Ohio State, right? They're not rolling out there with every single position, blue chip or whatever. They're very, very talented, but in a lot of these games, especially in situations like this in a college football playoff, in the past they've been outclassed. They're not right now, and I think a lot of that is just coaching and getting the maximum amount out of the team they have.
No doubt. It makes me think I would compare Notre Dame to like an MMA fighter that wants to get you on the mat and grapple, right? Like Penn State and a lot of these teams that they play, and Ohio State is going to do this, and we'll talk about that game a little bit later. But many of the teams that are in the upper echelon of college football right now, for an MMA fighter, like an analogy is like they're the ones that want to be up, right? They're going to be coming at you fast, and try to land a bunch of punches, kicks, everything like that while they're standing up. Notre Dame is going to bait you into that, and then they're going to take you to the mat, and then they're just going to start hammering you and just try to make it a fight within a phone booth, a rock fight in a phone booth. We like to use that analogy a lot. And they've been able to do it all season. They know their identity, and that's who they are, and they're just going to drag you down to the mat with them. And they've done a good job of it. On the flip side, I would say about Penn State, I agree with you. Like it just didn't fall their way this time, right? And there was a couple big plays. There's always a couple big plays in every game that you can point to and say, this was a turning point. This is what, this was the problem. And there was a couple of those plays that bounced Notre Dame's way. James Franklin is going to get, and he was, kind of crucified for it, frankly, for some of the decisions that he made in that game. And really for the fact that, yet again, Penn State is ahead, right? They've got a lead at 10-0. Looks like you're off to the races. You blow another lead, and then you have a quarterback. Again, it's quarterback, right? Like Drew Aller, 5-star, finally looks like Penn State has their guy, and he plays pretty well all year, but it comes down, and I'll own this for anybody who watched, the last week before the games. I said I thought Drew Aller was going to be the difference in that game, and he had the chance to be, right? He has that drive to do it, and he makes that huge mistake. And like you said, you can't leave that ball over the middle. Don't care if you're trying to throw it at his feet. Like if you're trying to throw it away, brother, like throw it straight into the dirt, throw it out of bounds where a receiver is. You can't throw it in that situation, especially as, if I remember right, he was kind of fading. Like he was fading to the opposite side, right, and throwing it back across the middle. So cannot make that decision in that situation. I think he'll learn from it. I think he'll come back stronger for it. However, and I think we can move on pretty quickly after this because we got to get to Texas as well. But I don't know if folks have noticed this, but watching Twitter over the past day or two, Penn State's losing like their whole receiving corps. So I don't know that those guys believe that Drew Aller's the guy based on what we're seeing these Penn State receivers do and head into the portal. So anyway, another big disappointing loss in Happy Valley, but it feels like they're knocking on the door and they're right on the cusp. So we'll see if they give James Franklin the chance to keep it going and get back.
Yeah, that we can close on this, like you said, and move on to the Texas game. But I think that's the one thing, if you are a Penn State fan or, whatever, you buy into this narrative about James Franklin, he can't win the big one. Rather than be mad about things that happened during that game, I think your anger should be pointed to him with the personnel, because they just don't have wide receivers. And like you said, the ones that they even have don't believe. So Franklin and their OC, Kotelnicki, I think, who came from Kansas, he runs a very, I think, interesting offense that can be successful, especially, it was at Kansas, right? I mean, Kansas was nothing, and he really helped Jalen Daniels and that Jayhawk offense, produced points for the first time in 50 years. But they have to find a way to throw to a receiver. You can't win a semifinal game in the college football playoff with 0 receptions from your wideouts. So I don't know if it's a coaching thing, if it's a personnel thing, but that's something they have to figure out this offseason.
It's also probably a credit to Notre Dame, and we're going to talk about them a little later. I mean, their defense is salty. That defense is for real. They're very, very good. And we saw that week one, right, with A&M. We didn't know exactly how good they were because it was week one. But throughout the season, they've shown that they're salty at all three levels of that defense. And I think that played a part in Penn State not really having a whole lot to show for it on the offensive side of the ball through the air, at least to their wide receivers. So, yeah. All right, here we go to Ohio State and Texas in the Cotton Bowl in Arlington. 28-14 was the final there. What did you take away from this one?
I mean, this was just a great game as well, right? I think we were, for all the rhetoric about the playoff and blowouts or whatever, like these semifinal games were awesome. This one, especially going into it, a lot of people were saying Texas did not have much of a chance. And I thought that they, kind of similar to Penn State, I mean, there's probably a few coaching moves that I would say were a little more egregious in this game than for Penn State. But, Texas brought it. They were right there. Their defense played a heck of a game, right? You hold Ohio State to 21 offensive points. That's really, really darn good. Ohio State could not get the ground game going. Jeremiah Smith was a complete non-factor. Texas defense was ready for this game. And I think what came back to bite the Longhorns ultimately was, two things, right? So first, the Ohio State defense is also really, really, really good. And, they showed that in this game. 4 sacks, 9 tackles for loss. They were in Quinn Ewer's face all day. Very tough for him to operate. Texas could not run the ball either, average only 2 yards a carry. But kind of what we thought would happen, right, is red zone stuff. And Texas just obviously that, sequence at the end when they're on first and goal from the 1 and it turns into the scoop and score for Jack Sawyer. But, I don't know what it is about whether it's Sark or this Texas offense, but this is a multiple year trend that in the red zone, their offense just turtles up. And, if I were to be questioning some of the offensive stuff, we saw Arch run the ball successfully against A&M in the final regular season game. We saw him run the ball successfully in this game. Granted, he fumbled, so if you don't want to put him back out there, I mean, he was down, but literally by a hair. So if you don't want to put him out there, I get it. But, man, he's been effective running the ball, and Texas couldn't run the ball all night, especially in short yardage. And you don't turn to him on the goal line. I don't quite know what they're doing there. And, the other thing, too, Texas basically just got on 2 big plays. You lose 28-14, and there's a 93-yard fumble return for Ohio State, and then the Travion Henderson play before halftime, which is just inexplicable. I mean, you cannot allow that to happen, right? You just score a touchdown to tie the game right before half, thinking, all right, we have not been playing very well. We finally put a drive together on offense. Our defense is playing well. They're forcing punts since that opening Ohio State drive. And then you give up, it was a 75-yard touchdown on a screen right before half. I mean, pretty inexplicable. And on the flip side, you and I talked about this offline, but I do think that, I'm criticizing Texas here again, kind of talking maybe about the loser first, but for Ohio State side, again, their defense played phenomenal. And that play in particular for their offense was just the perfect play call at that time. For Chip Kelly to dial up a screen there with Travion Henderson, who's extremely dynamic, catching the ball and running, with the ball in his hands, that's such a great play call because, again, in that situation, I think you want to be aggressive, similar to the Penn State, where it's all right, there's not a ton of time, but if we can get something, get a field goal before half, we'll be in a good spot. You don't want to be conservative there. And so you just run that play, and it's so low risk, right? I mean, very rarely does a screenplay go wrong. And if you catch Texas in the situation that they did, which is Texas bringing pressure, it just, they're moving chess pieces, and Kwiatkowski thought, hey, they're going to try to get this. We're going to, either force a turnover or sack or something, and this drive will be done. We won't have to worry about plays. So I'm going to be aggressive here. And Chip Kelly was just right there waiting for him to jump into the trap, and he did.
It was literally the perfect chess move, right? You had the corner blitz coming from the side, you're running the screen, and then if Travion Henderson can get past the first level and then, make one move on a safety, he's gone. And he was. And, Travion Henderson in the open field against anybody, I'm going to take that one-on-one, which is what Chip Kelly was thinking. It's just, hey, maybe we can catch him sleeping. Maybe we can catch him, get him on the exact right play call. And that's what they got. And, that one really hurt, I think, Texas before halftime, especially after you're thinking, hey, they're going to grab momentum, right? They just tied it up 7-7. And now they've got, okay, just get a quick stop here and, just play prevent essentially. And we're going to go into halftime at tie ball game, let's play and let's bring it out in the second half. And then sure enough, it's 14-7, before you can blink. So yeah, that one was tough. I just think it's, when you get to this level, when you get to this point in the season, you have to be able to adjust well and adjust on the fly, right? If something's not working, you got to adjust. And Ohio State just did that a little bit better. And they made, again, going back to what we said, Penn State, Notre Dame, there's a couple plays in every single game where you can point to. And there was a few plays in this game, the Travion Henderson one that you pointed out, as well as the fumble return at the end of the game. Those were the two big plays that completely changed it. But to the point of, switching things up, right? Texas completely took away Jeremiah Smith, right? He's got one reception for 3 yards on the game. So what did Ohio State do? They knew that they were taking him away. They were putting coverage over the top. They were double covering him almost all night. Carnell Tate steps up, 7 receptions for 87 yards, and they just kept hitting him all night. It's not like he had a big play. He had his biggest play was 18 yards on the night. But Will Howard kept finding him open and just kept, moving the ball down the field with Carnell Tate. And so that was something that I saw that and Texas didn't have one receiver that was over 60 yards. I mean, Jaden Blue had 5 receptions for 59 yards. A lot of that came from screen plays. Matthew Golden had 2 receptions for 51. He had, one big play that went for 27. So it's interesting to me, right? We talk about Sark being the offensive genius, but when it's come down to it, since he's been at Texas, he hasn't been able to make those adjustments better than the opposing team. And Ryan Day, to his credit, and Chip Kelly, they were the ones that were able to make the adjustments in this game to get the win. And the other thing it comes down to, you talked about red zone offense. Texas was also 1 of 3 on 4th down. They couldn't get that, short yardage when they needed it, which is surprising. I'm still surprised by it. I keep saying this. I know Ohio State has such a great defense, but Texas's offensive line is, probably 5 of those guys, or 4 out of 5 just declared for the draft. All 4 of those guys are going to get drafted. And the guy who's probably coming back, I think it's Campbell is coming back. At least he hasn't announced yet. He's a junior. He could announce. But Campbell's probably going to get drafted too. Like that's it. And for whatever reason, that offensive line has struggled at times during this year, at least as a unit, right? Like I think individually you look at tape, it's like, yeah, all these guys are going to get drafted. But then as a unit, there has been times like the Georgia game, right? Go all the way back to the Georgia game in the SEC championship, right? Like there has been times where this Texas offensive line just hasn't stepped up to the plate and hasn't been there when Texas has needed them the most. So those were a couple of my takeaways from the game. And then Ohio State they just continue to do what it takes to get it done, and I think this team has shown so much resilience since that Michigan game, which I didn't think they had. Honestly, I picked Tennessee to beat them, and yes. I was throwing them out, right? I was like, I think they're probably going to fire Ryan Day. If I had to guess, I thought they were going to fire him because of what happened 0-4 against Michigan the last 4 years. And if you have a first round out or even a second round out for this team, I think that he probably would have been gone. And, unfortunately for Lou Holtz, that didn't happen. But it's going to be really fun to watch. I will say this too. Hey, Ohio State only scores 21 offensive points. That Texas defense did just about everything they possibly could to give the Texas offense the chance to win this game. And Texas just couldn't make the plays when it mattered most. But that goes back to credit Ohio State as well, right? They have in 2 games, their first 2 games, they blow teams out, right? Score over 40 points in each of those games. And then in this game, they only scored 21 offensive points, and their defense comes up with the big play at the end. So this team can win any which way you spin it, right? Like however you want to play, we'll play whatever game you want to play, and we can still beat you. So Notre Dame, I think, ought to be shaking a little bit at that, having watched this Texas game.
Yeah, and I think, you bring up a good point. Just quickly before we move on to some just general news here about the Texas offensive line, because I totally agree that they have been touted as one of the best offensive lines in the country. A lot of those guys are going to be going to the NFL, as you mentioned. And yeah, the big games, they really disappointed. I do think one thing too that hurt Texas in this game, and we'd be remiss if we did not mention it, is injury. Isaiah Bond has been a complete non-factor basically the second half of the season, especially the last, basically this entire playoff run. Even the A&M game, he was not really doing much because of, I think it's an ankle. So he's just not really been himself. I know he was out there. I think he had 1 catch, but almost looks like more of a decoy. Matthew Golden in this game was in and out of the injury tent. And you brought it up, Carnell Tate stepped up for Ohio State, and Emeka Egbuka had a good game too, right? 5 for 51. Like he was a reliable target when Texas clearly emphasized in their game plan, we're taking away Jeremiah Smith, right? I mean, they were shading him with a safety all night. They had coverage over the top, and that worked. But the problem is when that works, you're leaving other guys on islands, or you're opening up other holes in the zone. And Ohio State had the depth to take advantage of that. Texas did not, right? You mentioned their leading receiver, Jaden Blue, is a running back. Their next, not leading receiver by yardage, but actually the leading receiver by receptions for Texas was Quintravion Wisener. So they had 11 catches go to their running backs, which I think Sark actually deserves some credit for that in manufacturing some offense when their receiving core was really pretty depleted / just probably not that elite to begin with, right? I don't think they really had a ton of guys that after you look back at the season as a whole say, oh yeah, this guy, man, he was so good and we had to game plan for him. I don't think they had that this year. And they were finding some success with the running backs, but similar to what we said about Penn State, like you can't win a semifinal without a receiver. Texas was the same way. Like, yeah, they manufactured some points. Jaden Blue's good out of the backfield. Those 2 touchdowns were awesome. But when you need somebody, it's 3rd and long, or your quarterback is getting hit, he's struggling, you just got to have guys that know how to get open. And the injuries really hurt Texas there. And, it could be one of those things, right? Like Texas was playing their 16th game, I think. So, man, things just get to you. Attrition, injuries. And it's tough. And, ultimately that doesn't matter. You lost the game, but it is unfortunate, I think, that Texas was pretty hampered in that second half offensively with just a pretty depleted receiving core.
Yeah, that's a good point about all these games, right? I think it's going to become, for these teams that make it this far, much more like the NFL, right? Where you get into the playoffs, you've played 17, 18, 19, 20 games, Now for college, we're not going to get up to 20 games, but no college team has ever played this many games. And so the injuries and the wear and tear and all of that is going to play much more of a factor in these later games than it ever has, right? When we had like the 14 playoff or the BCS bowls, or, go back to any other iteration of college football playoffs, national title games, the wear and tear has never been like it has now. In my opinion, I think you're right. It caught up to Texas a little bit in this game, as well as, some things that they just didn't have. Hey, go back to the start of the season. Jaden Blue turned out to be a heck of a running back, right? He played great. He's going to get drafted, no doubt about it. Played himself into the draft, but they lost 2 out of their 4 running backs in the preseason, right? And their new starter. So at the end of the day, I think that probably hurts them as well. And then right before we move on, those 2 skinny wheel routes that they ran with Jaden Blue out of the backfield for those touchdowns, pretty sweet play design by Sark there. Those were cool to watch.
Yeah, agreed.
All right, we can move on here. Let's get to the portal and the NIL gold rush, there's a lot of stuff swirling around college football right now. We can check out some of these headlines here. Texas Exodus, we could talk about that for a little bit in just a second. There's a whole lot going on since that Texas-Ohio State game that we just talked about. And then Quinn Ewers turned down a lot of money. Looks like he's going to the NFL, which was announced today by Pete Thamel. Carson Beck, he withdrew from the NFL draft. He's headed down to Miami. Got a reported $4 million NIL deal there with up to $10 million in other NIL deals. And then the FBS coaches, they unanimously voted yesterday, I believe. It might have been today. It was reported today by Ross Dellinger that they're trying to combine the transfer windows and only go to one transfer window from January 2nd to January 12th. And it would be a 10-day window, as you can see there. And that would be, that is not set in stone. Like that, it's not done. That doesn't mean that this is happening. It now goes to, I think there's 2 more layers that it has to go through. There's a couple committees that goes to the NCAA now to check it out. But as you can see, if the FBS coaches voted on it unanimously to get to this window, as everybody has been talking about, this is not tenable right now, right? Like everyone doesn't like how this is working. They don't like the calendar, and they don't like how much is going on behind the scenes with tampering. Like we need to really get this under control. And they're really ticked about everything happening before the bowl games, before the title game, like all the flurry of transfer portal activity that we saw before these games where teams are losing depth, right? Like all these kids that you think are going to be there because of the transfer portal window. If they're a backup and they want to transfer, or even a starter and they want to transfer, well, they really can't do it, unless they get in right now in order to get the best opportunities. So they're not going to play in their bowl game. They still technically can, but most don't. And a lot of programs have a rule. If you go in the portal, you're dead to us, basically. Like, so anyway, any thoughts there, like on the Texas Exodus? I think we could start there. We're looking at a lot of turnover there at Texas going into next year of production. We're looking at a whole lot of 4 out of 5 offensive linemen, like we mentioned. They've already declared for the NFL draft. You're losing Jaden Blue. You're losing, I think, 3 of those receivers, Bolden, Bond, and Golden are all gone. You're losing Quinn Ewers, who declared. And then on the defensive side of the ball, you also have a lot of guys that you're losing, either who have declared or who are seniors and are going to graduate anyway. So I'm interested to hear what you think about Texas going into next year after this loss to Ohio State.
Yeah, I think so. And then speaking of defensive guys, I saw Makuba declared. I thought he had a pretty good season for them on the back end. So, yeah, I mean, I don't think of it as like that big of a deal in general, I guess, because these guys are going to the NFL draft, right? It's not a transfer portal exodus. It's one of those things where, hey, man, this team's made the College Football Playoff back-to-back years. Like, they got good players that want to go to the next level. If you're sitting there and even if you're a junior and you have eligibility left, like, you kind of been there and done that at this point, right? We've been to the College Football Playoff semifinal back-to-back years. Like, I'm ready to move on. And so I don't think it's like an issue or anything for Texas in terms of like the team or the culture. I do think it'll be interesting to see next year just how they backfill, right? I mean, Sark has recruited very well. However, with the, whether he brings guys into the portal or guys have left, I don't follow, I don't know what the Texas 2 deep looks like, right? So we'll have a lot of time to talk about that between now and next season, but it will be interesting to see just in general how they can reload because, I mean, you basically lose every single playmaker on offense except for Wingo. You lose 4 of your 5 offensive linemen. Like, that's a ton to replace. So it'll be interesting to see how they do that. And then, for the Ewers thing, I kind of think it's the same thing, right? Like, I know he turned down a lot of NIL money, but the guy's been in college for 4 years. He's already transferred once. He's a Texas guy, right? Grew up in Southlake, wanted to play at Texas his entire life. At least that's what it was, That's what the story that we were told was, and that probably is the case. So he probably just didn't want to transfer. And unfortunately for him, he's got Arch behind him, and it's not just the fan base, but like his time at Texas was done. So he was either going to take an NIL bag and go somewhere else for 1 year, or he's going to leave Texas as the guy that basically brought them out of the depths. And I know he's gotten a lot of hate from that fan base. I think pretty unjustified. I mean, he's not perfect, and we've been very vocal about some of his shortcomings on this show. But you take a step back and look at how Texas was with him, behind center. Like, that's the 2 best seasons they've had since the Mac Brown era. Like, basically since Colt McCoy was on campus, Quinn Ewers just delivered them their 2 best seasons. So I just think it was one of those things where he's just looking around and thinking it's time. The other thing too, especially with Beck backing out, like, I don't think this quarterback class is that strong. So I have no idea what the grade on Quinn Ewers is or what he and his agent are hearing from NFL teams, but I would think he's going to be a fairly high draft pick, right? Like, there's no way he's fallen past the 3rd, I don't think, unless he bombs at the combine or whatever. So he's going to get a chance in the NFL. And, at some point it's just like, hey, it's time to move on. So I don't read too much into that either. But just speaking of, back in the NIL, that I do have some thoughts on, because first of all, this whole NIL stuff is crazy, and that's a conversation for another day. But the fact that he's making $4 million up to $10 million at Miami, isn't the craziest thing in the world that we've heard, except when you factor in the fact that he is about to get Tommy, or probably already got it, but like, the dude's not going to be able to throw until August, like week 1. Is he even going to play week 1, honestly? And they're throwing all this money at him. Like, I think he's a good player, and I know he had a tough year, but man, like, he's going to have no time to get ready. He's got to learn a new system, learn a new team, teammates. He's not going to have any time to like develop any chemistry. Like, I could see it working out because he's pretty good, and he's going to be going up against a bunch of ACC defenses, and Miami has a great offense, or they did this year. So I know their coordinator and stuff like knows what he's doing, but that's a risky move, especially when you consider the fact that he had just declared for the NFL draft. So what most likely happened is he did not get the feedback that he was hoping for, which is kind of funny to me, because to take this back to Ewers, like, all these kids already have agents, right? So you're not declaring, hiring an agent, and then getting feedback. I'm sure they already have it. So I'm sure maybe Miami just, gave him this bag, and it was too good to pass up. But, you're paying this dude minimum $4 million for 1 season, coming off Tommy John, after he had an up and down year at Georgia, and then was just told by the NFL, I don't know what he was hoping for, but I'm sure it was like, if he's getting a 1st round grade, he's gone. If he's getting a 2nd round grade, he might be gone. So like, I don't know what grade they gave him, but it was bad enough that he's like, yeah, I'll take this NIL deal. So that's risky to me. Very risky. What do you think?
Yeah, without a doubt. And by the way, I just looked up who Miami's first game is. It's Notre Dame, week 1. So, and speaking of Notre Dame, I wouldn't have been surprised at all if Notre Dame was the team that offered Quinn Ewers $6 million to come to South Bend.
True.
And so on that note, I'm just a little surprised, I guess, and I think a lot of people are thinking this way. I heard from friends who were like, I would have bet my life savings that Quinn Ewers was going to transfer somewhere and take a bag of money, right? Because even if he goes in the 3rd round, or say he slips right to the 4th round, I think he's going to have a good combine, and a lot of teams are going to talk themselves into, taking Quinn Ewers, because he has the intangibles. The kid's got a great arm. He's accurate with the ball. And, you don't have to make great decisions when you're throwing just routes at the combine. And so I think there's some teams who are going to talk themselves into it. And so I think you're probably right that he doesn't slip past the 3rd round. But even if that's the case, he's not making that much money in the NFL. I mean, we saw what Carson Beck, with what he's getting, even just in the $4 million, base that he's getting from Miami, is making more than Brock Purdy. He's making more than like 6 or 7 guys in the NFL, at least of their base salary, right? Not their signing bonus, but their base. So, from a money standpoint, it probably makes sense for Quinn Ewers to go. And that just speaks to the fact that something that I've been saying over the course of, the season is that this is just not sustainable, right? Like Mensa going to Duke for $8 million over 2 years is just so insane, right? And I'm not saying he's a bad player. I'm just saying that $8 million over 2 years for him is crazy money. It's just insanity. And it's not
from Duke.
From Duke, right? From Duke. We're not talking about Georgia. We're not talking about Alabama. We're not talking about Texas or Texas A&M. We're talking about Duke. Like, the money in this stuff is just so certifiably clown world that it just, to me, I don't think it's sustainable. So while there is this window, right, for these kids to be able to make money like this, like, hey, take advantage of it while the iron's hot, right? Because it's not going to be there forever.
I think one thing, just to specifically with Ewers and why maybe he made this decision. I don't know if you heard. I think it was him in his presser or something. But unlike, just to compare him with Carson Beck, right? Carson Beck was a backup at Georgia, bided his time, became the starter last season, and then was the starter this season. So he really had 2 years as the starter. And I would even venture to say last year, he probably wasn't making a ton, at least early on. He clearly made a ton this year because he's driving around a Ferrari and whatever else he's doing. But last year, he was a relatively unknown, 4-star recruit, had been on the roster for 3 years, I think. So, probably didn't have a huge NIL deal. Ewers did, right? He was famously reclassified out of South Lake Carroll in Texas to go to Ohio State early because he already had NIL deals lined up, given he was this all-world #1 overall recruit, mullet. He was just the man. And so he already had a ton of money as a guy who took one snap at Ohio State. And then he transfers to Texas, who I guarantee paid him a ton of money for 3 years. So he's already bankrolled a lot. He said in this press conference, he pays his mom a salary. I assume that she helps him, one way or another with marketing. But he said, he's like, yeah, it's been great. I'm able, I pay my mom a salary. It's, it's a real blessing, right? So he has made a ton of money already, which again maybe is why his situation, he's like, yeah, $6 million I could make or whatever, but I'm just ready. I want to go, want to be in the NFL. And whereas Beck maybe is a little bit less, where he had one big money making year and he can cash in on it again and potentially boost his draft stock.
Yeah, that's a good point. All right, so quickly before we move on, because we are going to be over time already, which free football, baby, is what it is. That's what we do here at Biscuits SEC. But so the last headline here on the January 2nd to the 12th, the 10-day portal window that the coaches are unanimously voting on. I think that's good for the sport. I really hope that happens. I think these 2 windows is just ridiculous. The calendar right now is certifiably insane. But even this, and I know that they're up against the academic calendar, which is why, it's the 2nd through the 12th. But even this now, because we've pushed the national championship so far, the championship this year is on January 20th, and it will be around that area, right, going forward because of the 12-team playoff. And hey, if we go to a 16-team playoff, it's going to get pushed even further back. So this doesn't prevent kids from leaving before the national championship. So you're still going to have this issue where you've got the 2 teams that go to the national championship, and you're going to have this 10-day window. And I guess maybe it alleviates it because you're going to have a waiver, right? If kids go into the portal, they're still able to play in that game for their team. And I suspect that a lot of kids probably would. However, you still have a lot of kids probably won't, right? Because there's the risk of injury, right? If you're a second string wide receiver and you have 25 catches on the year and you still, could potentially play in this game, you have the potential risk for injury, right? So it still doesn't alleviate that. I think it's a step in the right direction that we're going to this, The 10-day window, though, even 10 days is tough on the kids and on these staffs, right? It's like we're already doing speed dating, and now we're talking about speeding up the speed dating to a 10-day window where so I think they're trying to tamp down on the tampering. This actually may increase the tampering because you're going to have these relationships with kids behind the scenes so that you can vet them if you think these kids are going into the portal. I think it's going to make the job of the GM actually even more important right now than it already is at these programs, because they're going to have to know these rosters outside of theirs, inside and out, as well as their own, about who might leave, who's leaving to the NFL, who might get into the portal, what are we hearing, and then know the rosters around the country like the back of their hand, even better than they already do. Because once we get to this window, 10 days is all you got. It's not 30 days like it is, or 25 or whatever it is now, 3.5 weeks, and then another window in the spring. It would be 1, right? So it would be a total mad dash. A lot of fun for folks like us who cover it, but probably some unintended consequences, I think, from shortening it to this.
I agree. I think you're right. Like, I think it's probably a good thing net, but it's going to open up a whole other can of worms. There's as the system is set up currently, there is no perfect system, and in fact, any system you could come up with is going to be very, very imperfect. I think the only real solution here, and we've talked about this, one way or another, you have to start signing these kids to contracts that lock them in place for whatever time frame is agreed upon. But that's the only way to bring this back to somewhat of a normal level, because yes, shortening the window and backing it up till post, bowl season, I think is a pretty good move overall. It's still so imperfect, and there's going to be a ton of things going on behind the scenes that are not great. So
I hope it also puts kids in a position where they want to play in the bowl, but I am worried that you're going to get kids who say, I am planning to enter the portal, right, and just end up sitting out the bowl game anyway. I hope that doesn't happen, but I can see that coming down the pipeline, that even with this 10-day window, that's still probably going to happen.
Exactly. Like, hey, just putting everybody on notice. I'm entering the portal. I'm no longer with the team. As soon as January 2nd rolls around, I'll be officially in there. So open season, come talk to me. So, yeah, I totally agree.
All right. So here is just quickly to touch on some of the recent portal movement here. We had Damon Wilson, who is a former 5-star. He left Georgia. He's headed to Mizzou. Texas A&M still is stacking wide receivers. They got Jonah Wilson, 4-star from Houston. Pretty good pickup there for South Carolina. And I'm not going to say his name right, but Brandon Sissy, I think, or Sis. He was the top, or maybe one of the top DBs left in the portal from NC State. And then everybody's been really high on this kid, McKeese Grace from South Dakota, headed to Kentucky. So a big pickup there for Mark Stoops. And then one other one to note, especially as Aggies here, Donovan Green, who still was fairly injured for most of the year this year and pretty much had lost his spot at A&M. But he's got a lot of talent and he's very athletic. He is headed from A&M now to the Bayou to LSU. So still a lot of movement there in the portal, and plenty of kids still left out there for schools to get. Although a lot of the litter at this point, it has been picked over. So, all right, let's head now to the big game, national championship. We got Notre Dame versus Ohio State, and you can see it right there. Do the Irish have the horses? We'll see. What are your thoughts heading into this one, and to cap off the season?
Oh man, this one's tough because I do think, you can just see by the spread, like on paper, Ohio State is the better team here. They are more talented. They just have, especially on offense, so many more weapons, right? We talked about it with the way they were able to beat Texas without Jeremiah Smith playing a role, because you have to dedicate attention to a player like that. Notre Dame has a chance. Absolutely. They're a good enough team that they can win this game. At the very least, they can make this a game. So, how they do that, I think a lot of it probably, as I'm sure Marcus Freeman and his staff are doing, is like trying to replicate as best they can just what Michigan did, especially defensively. I think a lot of that kind of was on Ohio State in that game, and they just didn't really have a good game plan. But as best you can, limit their offense and just try to make this a muddy, tough, like you said, phone booth, knife fight in a phone booth type of game, because that's the game Notre Dame is going to need. They're not going to be able to score, 30-plus points in this game and keep up with Ohio State if Ohio State can get up and running on offense. So, it's Notre Dame's defense is going to have to come to play. They're going to have to be able to stop the run without loading the box, and they're going to have to be able to, I think, honestly, for them to realistically win, they are going to have to be able to play man on the outside, which the way I kind of see it going is that could get them blown out because Ibuka and Jeremiah Smith could torch them. But I think if you play a softer, keep everything in front of us type of a game, then I think you run the risk of just kind of getting suffocated and losing, 24-10 or something. Whereas I think if you can play man and bring pressure, you can force Will Howard to throw some picks. He's shown that he's a little bit turnover prone at times. And, you might be able to either help your offense by getting short fields or at the very least, at the very, top end of it, like you might be able to get a defensive score. Because like I said, I think if Notre Dame kind of plays, and Notre Dame plays a lot of man, their corners are very good. They like to play man. It's just a dangerous play when the team you're going up against has weapons like Ohio State. So I just think because Notre Dame's offense in this game, I think, is really going to struggle. Ohio State has proven over and over again they really don't let teams run the ball on them. And I think his name, Greathouse for Notre Dame, had a good game against Penn State, and maybe he can replicate that, but even if he has a pretty good game, like they just don't have the depth, I don't think, to really scare Ohio State or anybody for that matter in the downfield passing game. And they've been able to get away with that, obviously up until now, but it's very possible this is the game where that, kind of runs out. So I think Notre Dame has to be aggressive, which might sound a little, counterintuitive. But I think they just have to, if you're trying to keep the game close, sure, play a little bit soft, keep everything in front of your defense. If you're really trying to go out there and win, I think you got to be aggressive. I think you got to just man up on the outside, try to get pressure, and forced Will Howard to make those throws. He made them against Tennessee. He made them against Oregon. He didn't really make them against Texas, and he's been kind of like that all year where one game he looks like a, top 10 NFL draft pick. The next game he looks like a, decent college quarterback, right? And if you get him on an off night, you might be able to, frustrate them and force some turnovers. But that's kind of what I see as like Notre Dame's path here. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I said it at the outset of the show, right? Just as the way that Notre Dame has played most of the year and the way that Notre Dame played Penn State, which is that like an MMA fighter, they want to drag you down on the mat and then just start hammering you, right? And they want to make it a grappling fight versus a fight where they're just up on their feet taking punches because they can't hang with you if they're doing that. Their offense isn't good enough to do that. Now, I mean, I'll show you this. I put together this graphic here today. So Notre Dame's offense, people don't think they're that good, and they scored 38.5 points a game this year. Ohio State, 37.4. So, I mean, their offense is solid, right? But, and then yards per game there, Notre Dame, 405, Ohio State, 428, third down conversion percentage, exact same. And then their pass versus rush percentage, 43% to 57%. So they're both very balanced offenses. Ohio State likes to pass the ball a little bit more than Notre Dame does. Obviously, Notre Dame, much more of a running team. But I think in this one, really what it comes down to, at least my keys for Notre Dame in this one are you've got to have those defensive linemen for Notre Dame who've got, let's see, Riley Mills, he's had 7.5 sacks on the year. You've got Donovan Hinnish, who's had 4.5 sacks, and then you've got Jack Kaiser at linebacker, right, who's got 51 solo tackles, two sacks on the year. Those guys have to be in Will Howard's face all night because you've got Jeremiah Smith out there on the outside. You've got Emeka Ibuka. Those guys, like you said, if they end up trying to play man, which I think you're probably right, I think they're going to try to do, then you're going to have to be in Will Howard's face. And if you can affect him, he does make mistakes. We've seen that throughout the year. He made mistakes in the Penn State game. He made mistakes in the Oregon game, right? He gets a little bit flustered. You can get into his head if you are in his face. So I think that's big for Notre Dame. On the other side of the ball, for the Irish, they need to be able to check Ohio State. Because Ohio State, what they were able to do against Texas, especially in the first half, and I remember remarking this to a friend of mine who was texting me about the game, is that Texas at the start of the game, at least in the first quarter and a half, were on their heels because Ohio State was flying around. They were playing downhill on both sides of the ball, and they had the mentality, you could just see it, that they were coming downhill. They were not backing down from anybody, and they were going to be in your grill all night. And Notre Dame has to be able to check that because Ohio State is going to try to take away the run from Notre Dame. Everyone knows that, right? That is Notre Dame's game. That is how Notre Dame beats people, is they just wear you down and they beat you at the run. And then they get one or two plays right on the outside with Greathouse or with Bo Collins. So Ohio State is going to try to take that away. So Notre Dame has to have the running backs, right, in the screen game. You got to have Jeremiah Love. You got to have, who's the other, Jadarian Price, right? Those two guys out of the backfield have to be able to catch the ball and have to be able to check Ohio State, right? And kind of use their aggression against them in order to, kind of make Ohio State get back a little bit, right? Okay, well, maybe we got to worry about this guy, right? And then maybe you can open up a couple of holes there for Greathouse like they were able to do against Penn State, especially with that one touchdown. So we know Riley Leonard is not generally going to beat you with his arm, but he's going to have to make a couple plays in this game in order to do that. And Notre Dame is going to have to check that Ohio State aggression with the screen game, in my opinion. So we'll see if they're able to do that. Ohio State has all the weapons in the world, but I think they do have a chance at this one. And I think it was Josh Pate this week. He said it, and I think he's spot on, that Notre Dame needs to have a plan for this game to think they're going to win or plan to win by scoring 20 points. Period. End of story. Score 20 points, right?
Yeah.
Texas couldn't even get to 20 points against this team. So Notre Dame is going to struggle, I think, getting to that. And even Vegas thinks it's going to be a difficult game, right? Because 45.5, I think, is the over-under in this game.
Yeah.
So they're not expecting a lot of points scored. I don't expect a lot of points scored in this game. I think it's going to be a defensive struggle and maybe one or two shot plays. One or two big plays are really the difference in this one.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's such a national title game. So I do think it's going to come down to a handful of plays here. And I just think, I don't want to doubt Notre Dame, which is why I'm saying they have a real chance here, because I think they've proven that, they're just a tough group of SOBs and they can manufacture points. Their defense is salty. So I think they're going to be ready. And they're going to have a good game plan. It's just similar to what Ohio State did to Texas. They just have more guys. They have more bodies. They have more depth with players that can really make you pay. And
man, if Notre Dame can pull this off, that would be truly incredible. And like I said, I think it's certainly possible. I do think they need to play a flawless game, and they also, they might need some help from Ohio State, which it's not impossible, right? Ohio State lost to Michigan, who's not very good at home. And, they lost to Oregon earlier in the year. That was a back and forth game, but like there's some chinks in the armor for Ohio State, as much as they have looked, invincible, so to speak, in this playoff. Like there's some flaws there. It's just going to be whether or not Notre Dame, can play a pretty flawless game on their side and expose some of that stuff, or, whether Ohio State plays, because if Ohio State brings their A game, they're not going to lose. So they've got to play tight, a little bit off, and Notre Dame needs to really bring it. And, everybody's just, you got to be locked in. And so it'll be really, I think it should be a fun game. That's what I'm rooting for, obviously, without a dog in this fight, is just give me a good game. I don't want to see a blowout. I don't want to see a Georgia TCU, which it won't be, but I want to see a close game.
And, hey, everybody's saying that, right? Ohio State, they're an 8-point favorite. Everyone thinks that Ohio State could really blow Notre Dame out. There is the potential, I think, there. I think, if there's going to be a blowout, it would be Ohio State blowing out Notre Dame. I don't see a world where Notre Dame blows out Ohio State. But don't count out the Fighting Irish. These are the top 2 scoring defenses in the country. Ohio State, number 1, 12 points a game is what they're giving up. Number 2 is Notre Dame, giving up just over 14 points a game. And we just saw what Ohio State's high-powered offense did against Texas. Texas's defense is the 4th scoring defense in the country, and Texas held those guys to 21 points and did a very good job against Jeremiah Smith. A couple things they did wrong. They made a couple of mistakes, which is what cost them the game. But holding that team to 21 points is impressive, and Notre Dame has a defense just as good or better than Texas. So very possible that they can do that. And like I said, I'm with Vegas. I think it's going to be a close game. We make our picks every week on SEC After Dark, so make sure to join us on SEC After Dark here at the top of the hour once we get done. But anyway, that's enough about the national championship. Should be a lot of fun and a great game. But let's get back to our regularly scheduled program. We haven't done a Muschamp Coach of the Week and a Biscuit of the Week in about a month, at least a month. So I'm looking forward to doing this again. But Muschamp Coach of the Week this week is Hammer. I don't know if you're in on this. I'm excited to reveal this one. But the Muschamp Coach of the Week, for those who are new here, just joining us, we love Coach Muschamp, and that's why we named this award after him. He exemplifies, the college football spirit in terms of just being intense. He's all about, college football, all about developing players. And he always had, a good sound bite, and it was just a lot of fun to watch over his career. So we try to pick a coach every week that kind of exemplifies that, or might have had the spirit of Will Muschamp with him. And this week, I think we had a really good one, and it pains me to give it to an Ohio State coach. But this week's Muschamp Coach of the Week, not a whole lot to choose from over the last couple of weeks, since we only had a couple games. But this week's Coach of the Week goes to Ryan Day, and that is because he was asked a question in a press conference about the whole Lou Holtz fiasco. I'll take you through here in just a second. But he was asked about Lou Holtz, and, Lou Holtz, Notre Dame, won a national championship there in 1988. And Coach Day was asked if, after the whole fiasco, he had spoken to Coach Holtz and if they had made up. And I will give you his response here now.
I'm just curious. Have you and Lou Holtz ever talked since then? Either patching things up or comment between you?
No.
Okay, thank you.
So there's tough guy Ryan Day saying that he hasn't spoken to I don't know how old Lou Holtz is at this point. He might be 88, but no, he has not spoken to Coach Holtz since their feud. And here, let me set this up too. This is where it all stems from. Back, I think this was last season, so before Notre Dame and Ohio State played in like week 3 or week 4 last year. Lou Holtz was on the Pat McAfee show, and this is what started the whole feud.
And I coached at Ohio State under Woody Hayes. We won the national championship when I was there.
That's right.
So I'm proud of that. However, he has lost to Alabama, Georgia, Clemson, Michigan twice, and everybody beats them does so because they're more physical than Ohio State. And I think Notre Dame will take that same approach. I know that our schedule, it hasn't been the best. We're 103rd in strength of schedule. However, that doesn't bother me because every day we get to practice against good. We get to practice covering our good receivers. Won't be much different than covering the great receiver they have in Ohio State. And plus, we're playing at home. It'll be a close football game, but we will win because we believe. Forget who in the hell we're playing. Just tell Ohio State this. You take this message to Ohio State. You tell them they better bring their lunch because it's going to be a full damn day's work.
Hell yeah. I love that. Hey, hope you heard that, AJ.
You better bring your lunch because it's going to be a full damn day's work. I absolutely love Lou Holtz.
Yeah. And then, of course, Ohio State beat them, and Ryan Day was screaming, looking for Lou Holtz post-game. So I'd love to know where Lou Holtz is right now.
Exactly. I've got that clip here, so we'll show
perfect.
that.
Yeah.
Like, I'd like to know where Lou Holtz is right now. What he said about our team, I cannot believe. This is a tough team right here. We're proud to be from Ohio, and it's always been Ohio against the world, and it'll continue to be Ohio against the world. But I'll tell you what, I love those kids, and we got a tough team.
It's always been Ohio against the world, Hammer.
One of my favorite clips of all time, just screaming about, like an 85-year-old man. I'd love to know where he is right now.
Yeah.
So I could...
Yeah, you won't show your face around here, Lou Holtz.
Right.
With his dyed beard and everything.
Well deserved. That's a good Muschamp Coach of the Week.
Yeah, I think one of the better ones we've had this year. And then just I give him credit, man, getting that question and then just that his answer just no, we haven't spoken. Just one word, just move on.
No, if I see him, it's on site. So you're damn right we haven't spoken.
Yeah. By the way, Lou Holtz saw this and he responded to a tweet. I think it was a McAfee tweet. The McAfee folks were talking about it today. Lou Holtz responded and said that now that he has seen this, if Notre Dame loses this game, it's because they want to preserve Ryan Day's job, and said that he will be at the national championship game because of all the comments that have been made. He's going to drag himself to the game.
Lou, get off Twitter, buddy. You're already a legend. You don't need to be on Twitter.
Yeah, it's too much, man. So anyway, that's good stuff. Definitely in the spirit of Will Muschamp, the one-word answer, and just looking at a reporter like you're a complete moron.
Yeah.
So, all right. So our last segment here, our biscuit of the week. If you guys have a submission, we love to see biscuits, the best biscuits and gravy. Anything you got from around the SEC footprint. So you can send those in to us, contact@biscuitssec.com, or you can just DM them to us on social media, tag us, whatever you want to do, so that we can feature, great biscuits. We are Biscuits SEC. We love Southern culture. We love Southern food. So if you have a submission, please send it to us so we can feature it on the show. But this week, I did a little bit of sleuthing. If I didn't have a biscuit, during the week or something like that, I like to just check around the internet, check around the SEC footprint, and see what I can dig up. And this week, I was able to find this is the Biscuit Shop Company in Northport, Alabama. And I was originally looking in Starkville. I was trying to find one there in Mississippi, just because I was thinking about Mississippi State because they've had a big portal season. They've been bringing in a bunch of kids. Everybody's really excited about the portal class that they're bringing in, including, I believe they today got Anthony Evans from Georgia, which was a big get for them. So I was looking in Starkville, and the Biscuit Shop Company actually began in Starkville and then moved up to Northport, which is just north there of Tuscaloosa, a couple years ago. And so anyway, it's owned by Krista Ollie, aka the Biscuit Lady. That's how she's known in both Starkville and in Northport. Started in 2015. They moved to Northport in 2020. make over 100 types of biscuits. And this is kind of like a specialty, donut shop, like those Voodoo Donuts. And, there's Duck Donuts. There's many like that. But the biscuit lady, Krista, she makes all kinds of different biscuits. And you can see that one to your left is I think we got a cinnamon roll biscuit there. We've got some blueberry biscuits going on. In the middle is I think that's a banana pudding biscuit.
Yeah, it looks like banana pudding to me, which I'm all in on.
Right. So she makes all kinds of biscuits. She's got cookies and cream rolls. She's got key lime pie biscuits. They've made jalapeno popper biscuits, Snickers biscuits. I was very deep and getting very hungry as I was looking at their Instagram and all the different types of biscuits that they make. And then that final one there on the right, that is sandwiches, SAMMICHES, sandwiches. And that is a rolled out biscuit that she then stuffs with all sorts of different combinations with chicken salad. Sometimes it's sausage and cream cheese. There's breakfast sandwiches. There's lunch sandwiches, all kinds of good stuff. The whole thing looked incredible. So I was happy to find it and excited to share it with everybody else. Unfortunately, I found out, I was doing some digging on them, doing some reading, and unfortunately the brick and mortar shop in Northport closed. However, she still does take orders online. So if you check out their Facebook, you can look up the Biscuit Shop Company. You'll find their Facebook, and she still takes orders for those who are local to Tuscaloosa and to the Northport area. So be sure to check them out. Just Google the Biscuit Shop Company and you'll find their website, find their social media, and you can still put it in an order for some of these amazing biscuits that she makes. So like I said, I was really pumped to find Krista and the Biscuit Shop Company because it looks like she makes some great stuff.
Yeah, that looked amazing. That looks fantastic. I wish she would ship them.
She used to ship them, and they also had some in the freezer. I did a lot of reading on Krista. So Krista, I'll be sure to find you and send you this clip here because I hope you can get some use out of it. But anyway, check out the Biscuit Shop Company and do some Googling on them and find them on social media because obviously make some great stuff. So for Hammer, everybody, I am Bossman. This is Biscuits and SEC Live. Thank you guys so much for tuning in tonight. We appreciate it. We will be back next week, same time, same place. Please do go ahead and subscribe to the Biscuits and SEC newsletter. You can see that right there, biscuitsandsec.com/newsletter. It's free to sign up, get everything you need to know that's going on within the SEC right to your inbox on Mondays and on Fridays. And then be sure to follow us on social media, as always, at Biscuits and SEC across all social media platforms. And we will be on with the folks for SEC After Dark. The whole crew should be back, I believe. So we will be on here in about 15 minutes with everybody. We'll be talking about, we'll give some more recaps of the College Football Playoff Semifinals, and we'll also make our picks for the national title. So be sure to join us there in just a couple of minutes. Thanks again, everybody. We appreciate it.
Appreciate y'all.